Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Dinner Guide. I am your host, Chef Andy, and today we are going to be making a homemade pasta. We're going to be making some butternut squash ravioli. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to my ingredients. So here I have some beautifully roasted butternut still in its shell. I've got some thyme and rosemary there, some salt and some Parmesan cheese. I've also got some butter, some beef cube, stock cube, and some curry powder. I've got some parsley, some onion, and some chiffonade zucchinis. So just zucchinis really cut thin. I've also got some parboiled peas there. I've got a roasted yellow pepper. I've got some puree here that I'm gonna show you what we'll do with later. So this has some butternut in it as well. I've got some dough here that's ready, and of course some flour just for dusting. So we're going to jump into a short commercial break, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to assemble this beautiful dish. See you in a short bit. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those who missed out on the introduction, we are basically going to be doing some ravioli today. I'll start off by getting my pan a little hot. So very simple. For those who are just catching up with what we're doing now, I'm going to be doing some stuffed ravioli now. So very simple process. I am first going to start by dusting my working space a little bit. And then just to tell you a bit more about the dough, very simple dough, just a combination of some salt, some cold water, and some all-purpose flour. So this I'm actually going to just roll them out now quickly, and then I'll actually show you how we are going to come up with ravioli from this. All right. So I like to just press them down just to make sure I squeeze out as much air as I possibly can from in there. Remember, these were rolled and allowed to rest, so I'm just actually squeezing them back again just before we roll them out. Remember, it's always good to give your dough a bit of a press to make sure there's not any excess air in there, or any air pockets for that matter. Alright, so very simple technique. I'll just start by dusting my rolling pan, and I'm going to start with the first piece. So all I'm going to do is roll this as thin as I can and as wide as I can. Remember to also have a nice pot of oil going on the side just before you begin. So just remember to give that 1 or 2 turns after you make 2 or 3 right turns. So I always roll it out once, and I turn it 90 degrees, and I just roll that a little more, and then all I do now is dust it, and then flip it around, dust it a little bit more. Remember, you want your dough to be really dry. So now I'm just going to stretch this out a little more. Right. So very easy technique, simple as that. Right, so remember just to dust this right after rolling it out. Always make sure it's really covered in a nice layer of flour on both sides. We're gonna set this aside, and we're gonna do the same for one more piece that we're gonna use to cover the top. So just give that a nice press before you start rolling out, just to really get that to spread out a little bit. And then all you do is keep rolling and dusting as you continue. Remember, we're gonna roll it to the same size as the first one. Right, so our oil is nice and hot now. I'm just going to let that sit at low temperature first. And I'm just going to finish spreading this out about another 1 inch wider. So remember, the pasta dough, you can always make this fresh. It's always best done fresh. If you're going to make it in advance, I recommend store it in the fridge, take it out before time and let it come back to room temperature, because it will be a little tough to roll out in the beginning. So always just give it a bit of time to rest as well. This just makes it a little more easier to work with your dough. And remember, you're making pasta, you always want to save as much time as possible doing it, because it is a tedious job. It's got a bit of labor to it. So I'm just gonna dust that again. Right, so that's about nice and ready. So very, very thin layers, you can see, very, very thin. And the dough should be quite a bit dry, because remember, you don't want it also to suck up all that oil once it goes into the heat. Right, so those are ready. We're just gonna lay those in front of us like that, and I'll get rid of this. Right, so very simple technique. I'm going to show you now how to stuff your ravioli. And we will start firstly by just getting our butternut out of the cores here. So remember, this was baked for about 30 minutes with the skin on, and then we allowed it to cool off. So we only covered it with a bit of salt and olive oil. And all I'm going to do is just take it off the shells like that. Remember, at this stage it's a little easier to do it. It's always a little easier to peel or to scoop out the insides of your butternut when it's readily cooked. When it's raw, it might be a little hard because you might go through a lot of waste, but this also allows you to save on waste from all the trimming. Okay, we're gonna add just a little bit more in there. Remember, also be very cautious not to leave all those black spots. Don't let those black spots fall into your bowl there. So I'm actually just going to leave those as chunks as they are. And all we're going to do now is we're gonna cut up this beautifully roasted yellow pepper, which we're gonna also be using to stuff the butternut. I'm just going to use my knife to cut nice equal chunks from it. Right, so now we're about ready to go, and all we need to do now is get our station ready, which I'll show you what to do now. So in most cases, a lot of recipes will inform you or tell you in advance that you actually need some egg to bind your pasta. Sometimes I find egg is not the best option, because first of all, you do get people who are allergic to it, and second of all, you do get people who don't necessarily want any egg in their food. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you how we're going to get those beautiful ravioli pieces out of this. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to use 1 big spoon. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to sprinkle just a little bit of droplets over the dough like that. And I'm just going to use my spoon to spread that around. Remember, this is just to be able to make sure it actually binds to the next sheet that we're going to be putting on top of it. So very simple like that. And all I'm going to do now is scoop some of the butternut chunks onto the paper. So we're just going to go with about 4 pieces for now. Right, Right, so be generous with those chunks. Remember, this is basically the stuffing that you've been mentioning to your guests, so the stuffing that we mentioned on the recipe as we introduce the dish. You really want a nice serving of filling right in your pasta. Now all we're going to do is we're gonna top that with the roast yellow pepper that we had earlier. Remember, this was pre-done, so please, if you're going to use the same technique of making your filling, I recommend make your ingredients in advance, give them a bit of time to cool off before you actually have to work with them. So now we are going to clear this quickly. And now basically all we are going to do is we're just going to give it a nice firm press before we cover it on the top. This is just to make sure it binds together really well under the dough. So just easy as that. And all I'm going to do is just place the second sheet right on top, and I'm just going to make sure it spreads right around. Remember, you want to get a nice covering all around your ravioli sheets. And all we are going to do is just give that a small press by hand, and of course be sure to just keep knocking around them just to make sure you get all the excess air out of there. You don't want pockets to pop while you're frying these. So I'm just gonna give that a nice press all around like that. Just get rid of all the excess air. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pizza cutter and my mold here, just my plating mold. And all I'm gonna do is press around it, and I'm just going to work my wheel right around the sides like that. I'm just gonna give that a nice shake. Right, and that's just about ready. So all you want to do at this stage is just lightly dust those on both sides, just to make sure it doesn't open up, it doesn't dry off too quickly. And then we lay those on the side like that, and we do the same with the rest. So since our ring is nice and strong, I'm just going to use that to press through. And as I said, nice coating of flour on both sides, of course. And then I'm just going to do the same with the rest here, and we're gonna discard the rest of that. Right, so those are now nice and stuffed. This is about ready to go into the oil now. Remember to just be generous with that coating of dust, because this will allow your ravioli to hold even when it comes out of the oil. And it will also allow for the ravioli not to suck up too much oil as well. Right, so all we are going to do is just shake off a bit of the excess. And all I'm going to do is just shake it on the side of my hands like that. And I'm just going to drop those in oil. Remember, we're just cooking this lightly to get them just a little crispy on the outside, give them a bit of color as well. And they cook really well, they cook really fast, so be sure not to leave these unattended while they're cooking. They do take a very short span of time to brown, as you can see. So this is just to give them a bit of color, and then they come right out of the oil, and then we're just gonna go into making a sauce to go with this. Okay, so those are about done now. We're just going to remove these and sit them on the side for a little bit. Give them a bit of time to cool off. Right, very simple technique as I mentioned earlier. You also are allowed to blanch this in some boiling water with some salt. This technique I particularly like because I want the extra crunch from it, because I am going to incorporate this into a very runny sauce. Okay, so these are now cooked, nicely colored. So remember to give those a bit of time to sit on the side as well, just to allow them to cool off. Give them also some time to drain off all that excess oil. Alright, and those are done. So I'm just going to leave those on the side for a little bit. And all we are going to do now is we're going to change pans quickly. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start working on our sauce. So while we get this mess cleaned up and we take a short commercial break, we're going to come back and just show you the last bit of the dish, the basics of just getting the sauce ready, how to coat them in the sauce and how to plate them. See you in a short while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those who missed out on what we were doing before the break, we had just finished doing these beautiful parcels of ravioli. Now we are just on the last bit of the dish, which is basically the finishing and the sauce of it all. So in this beautiful bowl, I have some beautiful butternut puree that we had made earlier. So this is basically what I'll be using as our base for the sauce. So I'm just going to scoop that into a nice hot pan on the side. And basically we're going to be thinning that down with a bit of coconut milk. Beautiful aromas from the coconut there. Right, so nice hot runny sauce there. We're just going to thin that down with a bit of cold water. So about a quarter cup. And then we're gonna bring the heat to medium. So remember, we're just using the water for the thinning and not to lighten the sauce. The coconut cream, you remember you don't want to add too much water as well, because you do have some coconut milk in there initially. So the water actually just allows you to get a nice consistency of the sauce, allows you to reheat the sauce a little better. And while it thickens up, we're just going to finish off with some of the seasonings we have here. So I have a teaspoon of curry powder, then I've got some thyme and rosemary. Got some shallots there. We're just going to add about 1 teaspoon. And then I'm also going to add some of my julienne zucchini. We're gonna add a bit of that stock cube we had earlier. And last but not least, a bit of salt. So about 3/4 teaspoon. And then just a bit of butter to give it a nice glossy finish. So this is just about a teaspoon of softened butter. Just gonna drop the heat a little bit and we're just going to give that a mix. So nice beautiful fragrance coming from our pan there. The aromas are really good. The butter is really just getting the sauce nice and glycerin. Now this is just about ready to serve. We're just going to give that just a few seconds to heat right through. Right. Now to that we're just going to add our ravioli parcels. So I'm just going to use a slotted spoon there, and I'm just going to place those in the sauce. And last but not least, we're gonna add a bit of our pre-cooked green beans, garden peas, sorry. Now all we are going to do is just give that a mix. So basically you just want to coat the parcels before you plate them. And this should take just enough time, because remember your sauce is thickening as you cook, so you don't want it to thicken too fast. So please Remember to finish this last stage while your sauce is already hot, and drop your temperature to as low as you possibly can. So about 3-4 flips of each one, just to make sure they're all coated right over and above. Right, and now this is good to go. This is ready to serve. So I'm just going to switch spoons quickly. So basically what you want to do is you want to serve the ravioli the flattest side on the bottom. So I'm just going to place sauce on the plate now, and then turn off the heat. So basically just bring your plate close, always have your plate closest to your pan when you're doing this. You don't want to drizzle all that sauce all over the counter. Right, we're just going to add this last 2 pieces. There we go. And now just to finish that off, I am going to use a regular teaspoon just to drizzle some of that sauce from the pan. I like to use a smaller spoon because it gives you a little more control while spreading the sauce. You don't actually spread too much. So remember the idea of serving really good ravioli, it should just have enough sauce to coat it. It should not actually be sitting in a pool of sauce, because that would beat the purpose of calling it a pasta. Right, there we go. We have just enough sauce all over our pasta now. And now just to finish this off, we do have some grated Parmesan cheese here, which I'll just use to garnish my plate with. So I'm just going to go right over the middle there. Give it a nice generous sprinkle as well. Right, very simple. And now last but not least, just a bit of a garnish. So I'm just going to use a sprig of parsley. We're just going to lay that on the plate, and there we go. So very simple homemade ravioli dish that we've done today. Remember, you're not limited to using only butternut. You can also substitute it with some meat fillings. You can also try some very vegetarian fillings. You can actually have a sweet ravioli, which you can actually turn into a dessert as well, or just an appetizer on its own. So from my end, it's been a pleasure showing you this beautiful dish. I hope you can all now be able to create your own ravioli at home. You've been watching Dinner Guide, and your host is Chef Andy. You've been tuned into BrandPlus TV. It's been a pleasure being with you today. So until the next episode, have a lovely evening.